The French government is once again at the centre of a heated debate, one that touches millions of workers and retirees across the nation. In Paris, Prime Minister Sébastien Lecornu has announced that the controversial suspension of the pension reform's age and quarterly measures will now be formally integrated into France's social security financing plan, known as the PLFSS, through what he described as a corrective letter. Before the National Assembly, in a tense exchange that drew both attention and applause, Lecornu stated firmly that the government was following through on its commitment to transparency and parliamentary debate. He said, "The suspension is indeed the suspension of the two measures, age and number of quarters." With those words, he confirmed that France's divisive pension reform, the one that raised the minimum retirement age and extended the required contribution period, is facing a moment of reconsideration. The announcement came after weeks of mounting criticism from opposition parties, social unions, and ordinary citizens who viewed the reforms as a blow to the social fabric of France. The retirement age reform, which had sparked months of protests earlier this year, was suspended in September following growing political tension within the governing coalition. But what was initially seen as a temporary pause now appears to be taking on a more formal and procedural shape. Lecornu's appearance in the National Assembly was not just a formality. It followed pointed questions from both the far right and the left. Marine Le Pen, the leader of the National Rally, challenged the government's consistency, accusing it of confusion and retreat. On the other side, Boris Vallaud from the Socialist Party demanded clarity on the legal and budgetary implications of suspending core measures of a law already adopted. Lecornu's reply was both defensive and assertive, reflecting the balancing act his government now faces between political accountability and fiscal discipline. He declared before lawmakers that the debate must take place here, in the National Assembly. His emphasis on institutional legitimacy was deliberate. After months of strikes and street protests, Lecornu sought to shift the discussion from public squares back to the parliamentary chamber, a move seen by many analysts as an attempt to restore confidence in representative democracy. He continued explaining that while an amendment to the PLFSS was initially considered, the government decided on a corrective letter to avoid procedural uncertainty. Lecornu said, "The Council of State was notified last night of a corrective letter, and a Council of Ministers will take place on Thursday morning to adopt it." This statement, though technical, carries significant political weight. It effectively ensures that the suspension of the controversial pension measures will be enshrined in the nation's annual social budget law, not left as a verbal or temporary political promise. Behind this announcement lies a broader question about France's social contract, the delicate balance between fiscal sustainability and social protection. The original reform, introduced under President Emmanuel Macron's administration, had pushed the retirement age from 62 to 64 and increased the number of required contribution quarters for a full pension. Supporters argued that demographic shifts and financial pressure on the pension system made the changes necessary. Critics saw it as an attack on workers' rights and a violation of social justice principles that have long defined France's welfare state. Now, with Lecornu's corrective letter, the government seems to be acknowledging the intensity of the backlash and the political risks of pushing ahead without consensus. In the months following the reform's passage, France witnessed some of the largest protests in recent years, with hundreds of thousands taking to the streets. Labour unions, including the CGT and CFDT, organised nationwide strikes that disrupted transport, education and public services. Garbage piled up in the streets of Paris as sanitation workers refused to collect waste in protest of the new retirement age. That wave of social unrest left a lasting mark, and its echoes can still be heard in today's political discourse. For Lecornu, who took office as Prime Minister earlier this year after Elizabeth Borne's resignation, this moment is as much about political survival as it is about policy correction. He is navigating between competing pressures, from the Élysée Palace, which still prioritizes fiscal credibility, and from a National Assembly where the government lacks an absolute majority. Every measure must therefore be negotiated, amended and justified in real time. The debate over pensions is not new in France. It has long been one of the country's most emotionally charged issues, a mirror reflecting deep divisions over the role of the state, the meaning of work, and the fairness of social contribution. Yet the timing of this latest move is crucial. France is entering a period of economic uncertainty marked by slower growth, inflation pressures, and concerns about deficits. The Social Security budget, the PLFSS, is central to the state's effort to control public spending while maintaining essential welfare services. By issuing a corrective letter, the government signals that it wants to adjust course without abandoning the broader goals of reform. Analysts say this decision also reflects Lecornu's cautious political style. Known for his methodical and procedural approach, the Prime Minister is keen to avoid confrontation while projecting an image of control. His announcement before Parliament was framed as a commitment to democratic deliberation rather than executive imposition. As he put it, the debate could take place. It will take place as democracy requires and as the functioning of the National Assembly and the Senate requires. But even as Lecornu sought to diffuse criticism, opposition figures remained sceptical. Marine Le Pen accused the government of legislating by improvisation, suggesting that the correction was merely a political maneuver designed to calm public discontent without addressing the root of the problem. Boris Vallot, meanwhile, pressed the government to explain how the suspension would affect pension financing and the overall equilibrium of the social security accounts. He warned that without a clear alternative framework, the corrective letter risked creating more uncertainty than stability. Economists have also weighed in. Some argue that the suspension could delay necessary structural adjustments, further straining the pension system's finances. Others see it as a pragmatic pause that allows for consultation and recalibration. The Council of State's involvement underscores that this is not merely a symbolic move. It ensures that the process remains legally sound and compliant with France's constitutional principles. As Thursday's Council of Ministers meeting approaches, the focus will be on the fine print, how exactly the amendment will be worded, how the suspended measures will be replaced or deferred, and whether this correction opens the door to a broader rethinking of pension policy altogether. For many French citizens, the technicalities matter less than the underlying message that their government is listening. Public sentiment remains deeply divided. Recent surveys suggest that a majority of French voters still oppose raising the retirement age, even if they acknowledge the system's financial challenges. The anger that fueled months of strikes has not disappeared. It has simply shifted from the streets to the corridors of power. Trade unions have cautiously welcomed the announcement, but warn that any attempt to reintroduce the measures in another form will reignite resistance. In the words of one union leader, suspension is not withdrawal. For Lecornu's government, managing expectations will be key. The coming weeks will test whether the Prime Minister can navigate this high-stakes balancing act, delivering fiscal responsibility without igniting another wave of social unrest. The PLFSS amendment, once adopted, will go before Parliament, where debates promise to be intense. Each article, each line will be scrutinised not only for its financial implications, but for what it symbolises about France's social future. Observers note that the broader European context also looms large. France's pension debates are being watched closely by neighbouring countries facing similar demographic pressures. How Paris manages its reforms and its suspension could influence wider discussions about social models across the continent. As the session closed in the National Assembly, Lecornu maintained a tone of resolve but left little doubt that his government was under pressure. The promise of debate, of transparency, and of respect for democratic procedure was his answer to the criticism. Whether that will be enough to satisfy France's restless public remains to be seen. For now, the corrective letter stands as both a legal adjustment and a political symbol, a recognition that even in one of Europe's most centralised states, public pressure and parliamentary oversight can reshape government policy. Lecornu's message was clear. The pension reform, once the hallmark of France's social modernisation agenda, is now being rewritten, not on the streets, but in the chambers of the Republic itself.